If you like fishing for big brook trout and wondered where they all came from on Moosehead Lake, come with us this week and you'll find out.
Maine knows how.
You know, guiding folks every day, I get a chance to fish Moosehead Lake. And over the years, I've taken a lot of fishermen on that body of water. But one unique thing that happened to us one time, we were fishing along in the spring, and this gentleman wanted to catch a brook trout, and we caught a salmon, and we caught another salmon. Then we caught a lake trout. And we're trolling along, we're using streamers along the shore, and there's a little chop, but not too bad. A rod goes off, and I said, you got a strike right there, and picked up the rod, and he's holding on, I said, keep that rod up, and he's pulling it in, and we're fishing with a fly rod, with fly line. And I said, keep that rod up and just keep stripping that fish in slowly, but let the fish fight too. And if it pulls too hard, let me know, and I'll steer the boat into the fish so that will relax the line, but you won't break it. All right. And he's doing this, and I'm watching out back, and I see the line roll. And I see the line roll again. And I said, uh-oh. He rolls again and rolls again. I said, damn. I says, that's a brook trout. He's rolling that line. And he said, that's a brook trout? I said, yeah, now keep that rod tip up. He starts pulling it in as fast as he could. I said, no, stop, ping. See you later. And we never got that fish. But he fished that hard for that brook trout and just didn't get him. So that's my story.
Time and places like this reminds us the outdoors offers more than recreation. It offers healing. For many who have served, quiet waters and open woods means something deeper. That's why the mission behind this program matters so much. Welcome back. Today we have a special guest, Tim Obrey, who is a retired biologist from the state of Maine. He spent several decades, as he'll explain, up in the Moosehead region. And he just really has a wealth of information about that lake, the tributaries, and the surrounding ponds. Why you've been listening?
There's plenty of places to explore, and it sounds like he has a lot of knowledge about pretty much all of them.
Yeah, awesome. So Tim, welcome.
Thank you.
And we're really anxious to hear about your exploits, and if you could just give us an overview of your career and where you were, what you were doing.
Okay, so I started work for the department with the fishery division back in 1983, back when I was still in college, checking ice fishermen. And I was able to piece 4 years of college work together. And then I ended up in Moosehead, and I dug in like a tick. Didn't want to leave there after coming to Greenville. And so I've been a fisheries biologist in Greenville really since around 1988 through 2001. And then I did a short stint as the fisheries lakes research biologist in Bangor for like 5 years.
Right.
And then when my predecessor, Paul Johnson, retired in 2005, I thought the best place for me was back in Greenville. So I went back up there.
I can't imagine why there would be any attraction to the
Greenville.
second biggest body of water in the state.
First, Moosehead is the biggest.
It is the biggest, bigger than Sebago.
Yeah, 75,000 acres.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a huge resource. And Bob, we were talking earlier about just the different, you two were going back about the dozens and dozens and dozens of different areas.
Well, there's a lot.
To fish.
Yeah, there's a lot of fishing opportunities there. And these opportunities are because of what these gentlemen have done in that area. It was at one time depleted. It wasn't good. It didn't look good. These guys took something from that didn't look good to a world-class fishery. I mean, world-class.
Right.
I mean, you always had to go to Labrador and northern Quebec to catch brook trout like they do now. And now these guys created that for the people of the state of Maine, and they should be really...
Well, Tim, why don't you walk us through what, where the lake was, how it transitioned, and where it is today?
Yeah, it's been a remarkable couple of decades on Moosehead to see where we've gone and where we are right now. We've got records that go back. We've got real detailed scientific records that go back through the 70s when the Moosehead project started with creel surveys and use and harvest and age and growth, that kind of stuff. But we also have some old camp records that go all the way back to the 1800s. And where we are right now, especially with the brook trout, I mean, I feel like the brook trout fishing is as good as it's been at least since World War II, if not back towards the turn of the century, really, in terms of big fish. But we've gone through some just tremendous changes on Moosehead. In the 70s, we had a lot of small togue. We were stocking togue. We're stocking salmon. In the mid 80s, we saw fishing pressure just explode a lot. I was saying earlier, we had like 80,000 days of fishing on Moosehead in any given year, summer and winter. Of course, in the 80s, you saw some pretty dramatic improvements in technology. Fish finders, even outboards were up, better. Snowmobiles went through a huge change. Yes, gas powered augers. So all that fed into more fishing pressure. And then, so about in the early 90s, we saw the lake trout population go through a huge shift that we had never seen before. This was all new to us. And what we saw was the number of small lake trout, less than 18 inches, just went through the roof, exploded. And they basically ate us out of house and home. And so back then, of course, we had all that use. So we were in a very conservative mindset at the time because there were just so many people around. There were so many fish going down the road. And so we saw that we had all these extra lake trout. So we liberalized the bag limit a little bit. And then we went a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and we just sort of nibbled at it. And
But they were all undersized.
they were all, I mean, we had a lot of 14 to 18-inch lake trout, and we called them axe handles because they were skinny, and they were like this long and skinny, and they weren't really all that attractive to the anglers, and they were eating all of the smelts. And so, like I said, we nibbled and tried to get rid of them we didn't want to go too far with all the fishing pressure that we had. So by 2008, 2006, 2007, really, we started to see that population of small lake trout going back up again. And so at that point, we said, we got to do something dramatic to get rid of these fish. And it needed to be, we didn't know how long it would take, if it would work or not, but we went to a no size or bag limit on lake trout under 18 inches. And we went to 2 fish for lake trout over 18 inches. There had been 1 fish. So we really wanted to try to thin them down. And we're fortunate on Moosehead. We have this problem in a number of places, but we're fortunate enough on Moosehead that we have enough anglers. They're kind of the engine that drives the system. If you don't have fishing pressure, it's hard to harvest enough fish to make a difference. And so we're lucky at Moosehead. We instituted the fishing derby in the wintertime to try to bring more people up and to push home the message that we wanted people to take lake trout home. And it really worked. In 2000, so that regulation went on in 2008. And a couple of years later, I think 3 years after that, we were able to take that regulation off. We had removed 80,000 lake trout in 3 years. So basically 1 fish per acre came out of Moosehead. And the result was the catch rates for those small fish settled right down to where we wanted it. It was even with the catch rates for the lake trout over 18 inches, which was our goal. And I mean, the biggest benefit, which was the whole purpose, was to have the smelts rebound and have more forage for all of the game fish. So our lake trout got fatter for a little while. They're still struggling a little bit, but our salmon growth and survival improved, which was huge. And then sort of an unintended consequence was what happened with the brook trout. The brook trout population just went skyrocketing too, as well, just like the smelts.
And they're healthy.
Oh yes, they're very healthy. And so what we're seeing now with these shore spawning brook trout, these are the really big ones that everybody's talking about. those fish were always in the lake. We'd see 4 or 5 pound brook trout every year, but a handful. And I think when we finally got the lake trout thinned down enough, I think they were crowding out those brook trout. And so when we got the lake trout thinned down, that segment of the brook trout population just skyrocketed. And so right around, we started to see it, we saw a little bit of it in 2013, 14, but by 2017, we started seeing a lot of those big 4 to 6 pound trout being caught by anglers.
So what a fascinating progression that you witnessed. But Bob, I'm really interested in how Tim's timeline and the guides experience, kind of how it marries or matches up to what, I mean, because people love to catch fish, but if it's a skinny, scrawny fish, it's different than if it's a big, healthy fish, I would assume.
You can only sell that little scrawny fish for a little while. You have to catch a good fish now and then. You just have to. And these guys have produced them. Now they're catching salmon there. That is, these salmon are big and heavy and strong and fight. And they jump and they carry on. They got energy. But they're not these little scrawny things. There's some big salmon in there now. So they just did a world-class job. The department did.
Yeah.
And these biologists, to make that fishery what it is, it's just equal to any fish in the Northeast by a long shot.
Kind of makes the guide's job a little bit easier and makes you guys look good, or?
Well, it makes it that any time you can go and go fishing, you have the opportunity to catch a fish of that quality.
Right.
Yeah, it's there's some just quality fish in there all the time. We have nobody to say anything but thank you to these gentlemen for doing that, because we used to catch salmon this long. You'd barely see the rod. They wouldn't even snap the downrigger release off.
Really? Like, I mean, it used to, just the thrill of catching a salmon, but I guess that can get old when the salmon are
just little
things.
Yeah.
So Tim, you've mentioned, the lake trout, the salmon, and the brook trout. And how do they all get along? Do they have a relationship with each other, or they live in different areas of the lake?
Well, the one thing they all have in common is they feed on smelts. So smelts make the world go round on Moosehead. And when you don't have smelts, everything goes downhill quick, just like Bob was saying with those small fish. So they do share that in common. Now they typically, in the summertime, the togue and the salmon will use the same habitat. They're down below the thermocline. The brook trout tend to like the shoreline more when the water's cool. Once you get into the midsummer, even though a lot of the trout will slip out into some deeper water, maybe not as deep as the lake trout, but they do like to be where it's, under 65 degrees or cooler.
So Tim, a little bit ago, we were talking about the importance of the thermocline and how that impacts where the fish are, where you want to fish, but what does it mean, and can you explain it?
So the thermocline, the technical definition of the thermocline is where the water temperature drops 10 degrees and 10 feet. And on the big lakes, a place like Moosehead, that's usually around 30 to 35 feet down in the summertime.
Hold on. Did everybody get that?
Yeah.
About 30 feet down. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's where you want to set your downrigger. So that's where all the action is, and so below that really. So above that, from the surface down, it's probably from 72 degrees down to the upper 60s, and then once you break through the thermocline, it's low 60s to 50s all the way to the bottom, and so there's that barrier there, and the fish like that change. We were talking earlier, it's kind of like when you're deer hunting, and you got the fields and the woods, and then you got that transition. That's where the action is, right? So that's where it is for the fish too. They like to be right around that thermocline. And so Moosehead, there's ample water in Moosehead below the thermocline for those fish to hang out. That's where the salmon and the lake trout typically are, even suspended sometimes over deep water. The brook trout tend to hug the shoreline until it gets real warm. Then they'll slide out and be in a little bit deeper water, a little cooler water.
So the below the thermocline, that water, that deep water, will hold fish?
Absolutely, all the way to the bottom.
all the way to the bottom.
Yeah.
And when they are hungry, is that when they come into that thermocline? How do they go from the deep water to that active area?
So they'll cruise all through that throughout the summer. The smelts are the key. Wherever the smelts are, that's where your game fish are going to be.
Right.
So your young of the year smelts, the fry that are probably an inch or two long that were hatched in the springtime, those fish tend to settle on the top of the thermocline during the daylight hours. And then during the night hours, they disperse up, but they always settle back down to the top of the thermocline. Now the adult smelts, they tend to be on the bottom of the lake, wherever they are, whatever depth. And then as it gets darker, they start to come up. But you'll still see schools of smelts moving around.
Right.
And they're always below the thermocline, those big schools of adults. And that's where the fish are going to be after them.
They follow those schools around.
They follow them around.
That's what they eat. So, and you find those schools of bait, and then you fish near those.
So I guess it's still a little confusing to me. So you have the thermocline, and then you have the colder water below.
Right.
And that's where it's holding the fish. But why is the thermocline area, that 10 degrees and 10 feet, so active? The fish coming, as Bob once told me, fish look up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just where the best water temperatures are in
Okay.
that area. That's where
Yeah.
that's the more favorable water temperatures for the fish to be in.
Myself, I like to fish just above that thermocline, right on the very top of it. And if I'm using bait, I want to be right on that top. These fish are below, but they can see, and this water quality is so
Yeah.
good that they can see 10, 12, 14 feet. And this bait is acting erratical. And there's something wrong with him. So let's be eating him. He's an easy target rather than low. So anyway, that's just what I do. It doesn't mean that that's what everybody else does.
Tim, you had mentioned before when we were talking about just the water quality and, whether it's changed. I mean, 40 years ago, we were all told that the lakes were going to die from acid rain, or it was going to get so hot that the lake the fishery was just going to go away. What's been the real truth behind all of that?
Well, I think the water quality is pretty much unchanged in Moosehead. I don't think there's been any dramatic differences. The pH is right around neutral. There's plenty of cold, well-oxygenated water all the way to the bottom of the lake. So, no, the water quality in Moosehead is great for growing salmon, trout, and toad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Looking to save on utility costs? True Enterprises is a local solar installation team with over a decade of experience delivering custom energy solutions across Maine. Whether you're powering a home, business, or large-scale project, True handles everything from design and installation to long-term support. They make the process simple and the results reliable. Call today for a free estimate or visit trueenterprisesllc.com.
True Enterprises, company here in Maine that takes care of people on Moosehead Lake. You like catching big trout? You're on Moosehead? Get hold of these people. They do a terrific job.
So Tim, as far as managing this lake and studying this lake, you've also stocked fish in that lake in Moosehead and other lakes in the area. What can you tell us about the difference between a stocked and a wild-born fish?
I don't know if there's, well, when you think about like salmon, we still stock salmon in Moosehead because we don't have enough reproduction to sustain the fishery. I don't know if you can really tell the difference between a stocked salmon and a wild salmon when you're out there fishing in terms of how they interact. I think with brook trout, there's a big difference. I think a lot of these places where it's put and take, where the trout are really susceptible to just about any kind of lure or worm or bait or whatever you throw out there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas wild trout tend to be maybe a little more selective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we see that in some of the local lakes here, where after they stock, you have this big school of stockies, and they just migrate down the pond
Yeah.
together. and all the ones that live there are doing their own thing, completely separate.
Exactly.
Really?
And so a lot of people go there and they catch all the stockies they want,
Right.
but they never really touch any of the other fish that are living
Never
there.
catch the wild.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all those
Yeah.
fish know. They were raised in a tank or a raceway, all huddling up with each other, and you drop them into a pond that's, maybe 100 acres or something, and they don't know what to do initially. Eventually, they will disperse. But they, like with our spring eeling trout, the fishing might last for a few weeks or a month, and then it peters out. With the wild fish, the fishing goes on all season long.
Interesting.
You have to change as a fisherman to catch those fish.
Yeah.
And a lot of fishermen only have this certain window they fish in. And that's what happens on these little ponds here. They put in 5,000 fish. The fishermen catch 1,000. The loons eat 1,000.
Yeah.
And the rest of them, where do they go? Well, they don't fish for them. So they say, oh, it's all done. And they won't come back till next year.
We caught all the fish.
They caught all the
Caught
fish.
all the fish.
But
Yeah.
if you know how to catch those other fish, and there is some big fish that live in these little ponds, if you know how to catch them.
That's right.
Yeah. So.
Are there any things that you've noticed over your years about how fishermen can damage the fishery or do harm to the lake?
Well, I mean, you could take too many fish. You could overharvest the lake. We don't have that problem really now, because fishing pressure has dropped off so much. When I think about damaging a fishery, I think about invasive fish. That's probably the most significant impact we could have on our wild fisheries, is somehow putting non-native fish into a system.
That's what happened at Moosehead, right?
Right. We had
Got those bass in there.
bass and white perch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the bass went in the mid 1970s, the white perch in the 1980s. Moosehead is such a big lake that it was able to absorb a lot of that. I don't think we've really seen the full impacts from the bass introduction. I think the white perch, they're there, but they're not super abundant yet.
Yeah.
There's some very big white perch in
There
there.
is some monsters.
Yeah, they catch them from time to time, but you don't see them everywhere.
Right.
And the same with the bass. Moosehead is such a cold lake that the bass don't really do well there. And so it's been a long time. They were isolated in places like Spencer Bay and Lily Bay for a long time. They're just starting to sort of disperse more to the Rockwood and the Greenville area. You see them up in North Bay a little bit. So I don't think we've really can close the book on that.
Yeah.
Right. But you were saying that they hatch late in the season.
Right.
And then the cold weather comes, and that really eliminates a large part of the new crop, so to speak.
Right. So young of the year bass, the fry, have to reach a certain size before the water temperatures drop off in the fall, and then they go into what's called the starvation period. And if they don't reach a certain size by that time of the year, they basically have a high mortality rate. And that on Moosehead, the growing period is so short, from July to maybe the end of September, early October, that we just saw really high mortality on those trout, on the bass fry. So, yeah, so they were basically isolated in these warm basins like Lily Bay and Spencer Bay, where they had a longer growing season, but they could never really spread out to Rockwood and Greenville. So they were low in numbers, but the bass that survive, they grow to enormous sizes, right?
Unreal.
Yeah.
Bob, you're telling you have people wanting to fish them now?
They do. I have people that come and say, we want to catch some of those monstrous bass they catch in Moosehead.
Yeah.
I said, you're going to eat them? Yeah. Okay, let's go catch them.
Worms and all?
No, they don't. But I noticed in a lot of those shallow waters, we don't have the bait in there. We don't have the red fins, and we don't have the golden shiners that we used to.
Right.
All around those pylons used to be full. You could throw a trap in and come back in a half an hour, be full. Now you throw a trap in, you pick it up, there ain't nothing in it.
That's right.
They ate them.
That is a common complaint that we've heard from the folks around the camp owners around the lake, is
Yeah.
the minnows are gone. We used to call them the Moosehead minnows. I think
Right.
they were lake chubs,
Exactly.
but you could fill your bait trap, and now you can't
Because of the
find
bass?
Well, I don't know, but I'm just saying that now we have bass and we have yellow perch and white perch, and they're eating those fry
Right.
because they're gone.
Right.
I mean, we used to fish there every day. We'd go there and fish for 14 days in a row. I'd run out of bait so many times. And I'd go to a guy, I knew he had a trap there, and I'd take a dozen bait and put $5 in his trap and throw it back in. He was a bait dealer.
Yeah.
And he probably pulled it up and said, "What the heck? I got $5 in my trap."
You put it right in the trap?
Yeah, put it in the trap, you know. And whatever, you know. But you had to feel good about what you were doing.
Ultimate self-service or
Yeah,
honor
yeah.
system.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But those are gone now.
Hey,
So I don't know.
so the invasive species are really a big concern. Are there, you know, as a biologist, we've heard about how you've really studied this lake and the whole surrounding lakes for 40 years.
Mm.
What is the biggest? You had a huge success story of working through and managing it, but what's your biggest concern?
I think the biggest concern is invasive fish.
Yeah.
And we're so fortunate up in this country to still have our native and wild fisheries intact. I mean, I think of the heritage ponds in the state, I think there were just over 500. And I think I've had 40% of them in the Moosehead region.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's really unique. Those fish have been there for 10,000 years, really,
Right.
since the glaciers receded, and very little impact from any stalking or anything like that. So we really need to take care of that. We need to have zero tolerance for any invasive fish. And I think the department has done a great job over the last 20 years getting that word out to the public. We still see it from time to time in places where you'll see crappie introduced or bass get introduced, pike get introduced. But I think most of the fishermen get it, that what we have up here, what we have left up here is unique. You don't have to look too far to the south and see what happens when you get invasive fish and overdevelopment. Right. Brook trout used to be native all down the East Coast, and now it's really northwestern Maine where we've got concentrations of those fish left. So we need to do everything we can to protect that. So we need fishermen not to spread fish around. We need to be really cautious about all these dam removal projects because this isn't 1925 or 1926, it's 2026. And a lot of things have changed since those dams were put in. And I think of the Penobscot, where there are pike and crappie and catfish in the lower ends of the Penobscot. And every time you take a dam out, those fish move. And every time they move, you make another source for people to pick them up and move them somewhere else. So we need to really be careful about what we do with dam removals and to protect what we've got left up here.
Yeah, but educating the angler, I mean, as far as if you're in Moosehead and you catch a bass, you have to identify that as an invasive species. And what do? You kill it. You throw it out. You don't throw it back, though.
Yeah, we encourage people to kill those fish.
Yeah,
we're never going to get rid of them. There's no tool in the fishery biologist toolbox to get rid of those invasive fish, and that's why it's so devastating when you get a new introduction, because there's no way to get rid of that unless it's a little pond, a headwater pond that we can chemically reclaim, like we did at Big Wadley and Big Reed and Thistle. You can do those ponds, but a place like Moosehead or Big Lake, I mean, it's done. You can't get rid of it. And those fish will spread to every other water downstream. You can't stop fish from moving downstream, and you have limited capacity to limit movement upstream. So it's really devastating. It's forever.
Right. There's no
Going back.
There's no going back. Yeah. I mean, we were talking about pike in some of the other lakes.
But we've been talking mostly about lakes. These gentlemen do a lot of work on these rivers. And there's a lot of fly fishermen that travel from all over the country to come here to Maine to go fly fishing. And that's important to all these camp owners. And so can you give us a little insight of how that's going? And maybe even, I'm catching smallmouth on the East Outlet now.
Yeah.
And it's sort of heartbreaking.
It is. They live in our fishery, in our fishway.
Yeah.
When we open up that fishway trap in the spring, there's always a handful of bass
Yeah.
hiding in there because they're trying to get out of the current. 'cause
Right.
It's so heavy there. But yeah, so I mean, we do a lot of work on the east outlet.
Mhm.
We do a little bit of work on the moose and the roach. We run the fishway trap at the dam on the east outlet every couple of years just to monitor the amount of reproduction in the river for salmon. But yeah, bass. I mean, they're in the mouth of the Roach. They're all through the Moose River right now because they're in Rockwood. They've made their way to Rockwood, and there's a handful in the East Outlet, but
Yeah.
it's a tough place for a bass to make a living in the East Outlet.
It's a little current in
Yeah,
there.
it's pretty feisty there in the spring.
Yeah. But there's some nice fish there now.
Yeah, so all of the success that we've had on Moosehead that flows down into the river.
Yeah.
Those salmon they come up into the lake to feed, and they drop back into the river when the temperatures are right.
So they do go back and forth.
They do.
That dam does have that ability, or do you
Yes.
have to move them?
No, so they'll come downstream through the gates
Yeah.
whenever they want from the lake into the river. And we have a fishway in that dam that's open all the time.
Yeah.
And then, like I was saying, every couple of years we'll put a trap in that fishway just to count the fish as they go up. So sort of a sanity check on what's being produced in the river down below. So we get a good idea of what that river population looks like. But yeah, so those big trout, they'll catch a few of those in the river.
Right.
The salmon growth is improved, so the salmon fishing is improved in the East Outlet. And every day when we go to tend that fishway trap, there's 5 drift boats lined up below the dam and people fishing off the dam. It's awesome to see it.
It's really nice.
Yeah, it's a great fishery.
And those guys that kept that dam open, I take a lot of disabled vets, and that's a place I can bring them
Yeah.
to fish off there because they don't have the ability to go into water and wade, or they don't have the funds to hire a guide to go on a drift boat. We'll take them, but I don't bring my drift boat there. There's guys there making a living, and it's not. I'll bring somebody there to wade, but I don't bring them there in my drift boat.
Yeah.
There's enough guys that need to make a living there.
Yeah.
But that's such a nice fishery.
It's a great spot there at the dam. I'll give the guys at Brookfield a plug too.
Me
I've
too.
worked with those guys my whole career. There's 2 offices. There's one I think in Lewiston and one in Millinocket. And I've worked with both because they manage the Kennebec and the Penobscot, which is also in the upper Penobscot in my area. And whenever I've had a fisheries issue that I thought they could help with, they've been right on the ball and helped us with it, doing whatever they could.
Sure.
They communicate great with the guides, the local guides there, telling them about the flows and getting input from them on the flows. And I can't say enough good about what the folks at Brookfield have done to help the fishing in my region.
I was really scared they were going to block that gate off and I wouldn't be able to bring them guys, even though they can't cast there very well.
Yeah.
But I can teach them to roll cast there and get by,
Yeah. I think that when Brookfield first bought those dams from I think it was Florida Power and Light maybe at the time, they had talked about security issues and blocking that dam off. And so at the time, I believe it was our commissioner, Chandler Woodcock, had some discussions with them and they kept it open. And it is a great place. You can cast off the dam. It's a little tough with the back cast,
Right.
but the grassy spot on the north side is a beautiful place to teach people to fly fish.
I
And
put
you
so
catch
many
fish.
guys there with wheelchairs. I bring them down, lock them in, and they can cast.
Yeah.
And they have an opportunity to go. And they have a picnic table there, and I can cook lunch for them. And it's a great thing.
Yeah.
So I say thank you to those guys also.
Yeah.
So, as a wrap up question, what does the future look like in the whole Moosehead region? I'm talking about the other ponds and Moosehead and the tributaries.
Well, I think it's pretty good. I mean, I feel really good about where we are with Moosehead right now. I think we've got the right regulations in place, at least for the near future, to protect those big trout.
Yeah.
They've been around now we've had them for like 10 years where the catch rates have been really good. People can go there and you're not going to go there and catch a big trout every time, but you have a realistic opportunity to catch a 4 to 7 pound trout on Moosehead right now. And I feel, like I said, I feel good about that. I think we still have a lot of work to do. It's not something that you can just say, well, it's good. We'll go walk away and we'll go work on Chisunka. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So the guys, like I said, I've retired now, but the guys that are going to be working there have a lot of work to do to make sure they keep on top of that as well as the other waters. So I feel good about that. I think the trout ponds, with the new regulations that we have, some of the slot limits have really improved. I know a lot of guys don't like the slot limits.
It's just complicated because
It
it
can be.
vary so much lake to lake.
It can be. I was watching your show with V. Paul, and he brought up Wiggy. I was good friends with Wiggy. I went to a bunch of sporting shows with him, and we had a lot of conversations about the slot limits. And he was just deathly opposed to them. And then I remember he called me one day. He's like, "Tim, he says, I just can't catch a fish in the slot. The fish are all too big." And I said, "Wiggy,
did you have a pity party?
Not a problem.
I said, "Wiggy, that's the kind of problem I like to have." But I know the guys, we actually changed on some of the waters that up in that country, we did drop back to just a 2-fish limit, the places that were open in the wintertime, because I don't think the slot limit works great in the winter where you have, maybe a high mortality rate on release fish.
Right.
Yeah.
But from a data geek's point of view, when I look at the catch rates and the size structure of the fish in those ponds today versus before, some of the S17 and S16 regulations went into effect, it's night and day. The fish quality is much better now.
Well, I'll tell you, it's, as you've said a couple times, it's a world-class fishery today. And really people from all over the state, New England and the country should really, to get out on Moosehead, it is big water and it's a big place and there's lots of opportunities. You got to be careful too, because you can get into trouble, but it's real wild water out there, and it's a great fishery. And Tim, we thank you for your decades of effort to bring that fishery around, and Bob and Wyatt, you guys going out there and really helping in that whole process too. It's been a great thing to see Moosehead turn the way it has. So Tim, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, all right.
We really appreciate that, and we'll be back in just a minute. Thanks. Maintaining a fishery in Maine is a hard thing to do, but so is managing your financial needs. I encourage everybody to check out Sebasticook Valley Credit Union for all their financial needs.
So we've been talking a lot about brook trout and where they live and how to catch them, and so I wanted to take a few minutes for my how-to and talk about releasing these brook trout. So when you catch these brook trout, first things first, you want to make sure that if you're using a net, you want to make sure that it's wet. And same thing with your hands if you're going to be handling these fish. Net-wise, you want something that is at least rubber coated, if not full rubber. That minimizes the amount of scratching that can happen on those fish. These brook trout, they don't have hard scales like other kinds of fish, and they have this thin layer of a protective slime that you want to make sure stays on that fish. And so you have them in the net is wet, your hands are wet. If you can at all, if you're using barbless hooks when you're fly fishing, maybe you can just put some slack on the line, and I do the popcorn shake, where you just have the fish in the net, you give it a couple shakes, and sometimes that hook will fly right out as long as there's no barb on it. In other ways, if I can keep it in the net and reach in with a long pair of forceps, that's also great to minimize the amount of time that I'm trying to hold that fish. And then picture-wise, you get ready, you reach in, you make sure you're supporting the underside, the belly of that fish, so that it stays comfortable. You just pick it up, take a couple good photos, and you can release that fish pretty easily. You don't want to rush him. Don't just throw him in. Just kind of gently put that fish in the water, or put him back in the net, and you can drop the whole net in the water, and he'll swim off when he's ready. So that's some tips for releasing these brook trout. We're always going after these big brook trout and salmon, and a great place to stop is the Moosehead Trail Trading Post. They have pretty much everything that you could want, and it's a great place to stop in. The guys there are very helpful, and I always leave there with the hottest lure. That always have the best luck.
Support for sharing Maine's outdoor knowledge comes from organizations that also help us serve veterans and first responders. Understanding waters like Moosehead takes long-term commitment, and conversations like this are made possible by our partners who support Pine Grove programs.
Maine Knows How is made possible by you and by these community-minded sponsors. Modern Woodmen of America, a member-owned fraternal financial services organization. Together with our members, we've been touching lives and securing futures since 1883. True Enterprises, a local solar installation team with over a decade of experience delivering custom energy solutions across Maine. Sebasticook Valley Federal Credit Union, supporting our local community with valuable services, a friendly atmosphere, and caring employees. J.W. Parks Golf Course, a 9-hole facility with a full-service golf shop and driving range. Pine Grove Programs, supporting veterans, first responders, and law enforcement by providing free outdoor opportunities for those who serve and their families. Moosehead Trail Trading Post, offering quality hunting and fishing gear with expert advice for your budget and outdoor needs. And by Digital Spirit Media, delivering over 30 years of technical expertise in media and event production. Maine Knows How.